Federalist 71, Part 3. We'll start with paragraph 5. Please make sure that you listen to the first parts of this Federalist so that you can get the big picture. It may perhaps be asked how the shortness of the duration in office can affect the independence of the executive on the legislature, unless the one were possessed of the power of appointing or displacing the other. One answer to this inquiry may be drawn from the principle already remarked, that is, from the slender interest a man is apt to take in a short-lived advantage, and the little inducement it affords him to expose himself on the account of it to any considerable inconvenience or hazard. Another answer, perhaps more obvious though not more conclusive, will result from the consideration of the influence of the legislative body over the people, which might be employed to prevent the re-election of a man who, by an upright resistance to any sinister project of that body, should have made himself obnoxious to its resentments. So you want a president to serve for 4 years so that, number one, if there are people are thinking with their emotions rather than reason, the president can say, no, this law, if it's enacted, it'll be to your detriment, and I'm not going to allow it. I'm going to veto it. So the worst thing we can do is let this president only serve for 1 or 2 years, because then he says, well, I don't care what happens. I'm just going to be in the office for 1 year or 2 years. Whereas with 4 years, he'll say, no, maybe in a year, people will realize they made a mistake and they will really, really appreciate and honor me. And another thing is, if the president serves for a 1 year or 2 year terms, then the representatives that are in the House of Representatives can actually, they can actually fool people and tell them bad things about the president and influence things that way, just in order to make themselves popular. Whereas if he serves for longer term, they might not be able to do that. People might not listen to them. People might say, well, let's give him some time. Let's see how he does, how he performs. Next paragraph, it may be asked also whether a duration of 4 years would answer the end proposed, and if it would not, whether a less period, which would at least be recommended by greater security against ambitious designs, would not, for that reason, be preferable to a longer period, which was at the same time too short for the purpose of inspiring the desired firmness and independence of the magistrate. It cannot be affirmed that a duration of 4 years or any other limited duration would completely answer the end proposed, but it would contribute towards it in a degree which would have a material influence upon the spirit and character of the government. If you remember, in the past, Federalists have mentioned that Hamilton definitely wanted a stronger presidency. He actually wanted the president to serve much longer. In one of his speeches in the Constitutional Convention, he said the president may serve for life. So here he's really, really disappointed that they let the president serve for only 4 years. But he says, well, this is the Constitution and I'm defending it. So he's not saying much about it. Okay, I'll continue with the paragraph. But between the commencement and termination of such a period, there would always be a considerable interval in which the prospect of annihilation would be sufficiently remote not to have an improper effect upon the conduct of a man, imbued with a tolerable portion of fortitude, and in which he might reasonably promise himself that there would be time enough before it arrived to make the community sensible of the propriety of the measures he might incline to pursue. Though it be probable that he approached the moment when the public were, by a new election, to signify their sense of his conduct, his confidence, and with it his firmness would decline. Yet, both the one and the other would derive support from the opportunities which his previous continuance in the station had afforded him, of establishing himself in the esteem and goodwill of his constituents. So, President, when he serves for a long term, like a 4-year term instead of a 1 or 2 year term, he says, no, I'm going to actually decide on something that people will not like immediately, but in 2 or 3 years will come to honor me and appreciate what I've done. He might then hazard with safety in proportion to the title he had acquired to the respect and attachment of his fellow citizens. As on the one hand, a duration of 4 years will contribute to the firmness of the executive in a sufficient degree to render it very valuable ingredient in the composition. So part of this power, when he says ingredient, this is part of the power and authority that's given to the president to make that branch of the government strong to stand on its feet, and that's a 4-year term. So on the other, it is not enough to justify any alarm for the public liberty. If a British House of Commons, from the most feeble beginning, from the mere power of assenting or disagreeing to the imposition of the next law, have, by rapid strides, reduced the prerogatives of the crown and the privileges of the nobility within the limits they conceive to be compatible with the principle of a free government, while they raised themselves to the rank and consequence of a co-equal branch of the legislature, if they have been able in one instance to abolish both the royalty and the aristocracy, and to overturn all the ancient establishments as well in the church as state, if they have been able on a recent occasion to make the monarch tremble at the prospect of an innovation, this innovation, or this thing that the monarch became scared of the power of the people, Hamilton says in his footnote, this was the case with respect to Mr. Fox's India Bill, which was carried in the House of Commons and rejected in the House of Lords to the entire satisfaction, as it is said, of the people. The East India Company, there was a law that was being passed in Parliament that was going to give the running of the East India Company to a special commission. And in one house, they voted for it. In the other house, they rejected it. And here, Hamilton, without going too deeply into what goes on in the British government, Hamilton says that the people, as we have seen in the British system, at first they had no power in the House of Commons and Parliament. But gradually, as we've seen, they gradually became more powerful, more powerful, more powerful. Now they even make the king sometimes tremble if the king decides to go against them. Even at one time during the Civil War in Britain, they wanted to do away with the Church of England or anything that had to do with that court and palace. He says the people, if they want to, they're very strong, and they will block through the legislative branch that represents them the most. they can block anything that other branches can throw at them. In other words, he's saying that 4-year terms for president is great, but at the end of the day, if the president wants to do something wrong, you people, through your representatives, through the checks and balances we've put in this system, can stop the president from doing anything that's damaging. So let me finish this paragraph real quick, or this last 2 sentences. If they have been able on a recent occasion to make the monarch tremble at the prospect of an innovation attempted by them, what would be to be feared from an elective magistrate of 4 years' duration with the confined authorities of a president of the United States? What but that he might be unequal to the task which the Constitution assigns him? I shall only add that if his duration be such as to leave a doubt of his firmness, that doubt is inconsistent with a jealousy of his encroachments. So he's just wrapping it all up. He's saying, we want a vigorous president, an energetic president, somebody with authority, but at the end of the day, we want this because we want the good of the society. We want the people, in case the people, something happens and through emotions they want laws to be passed that in the long term would be bad for the society. We want the president not to be scared to tell them, no, this is not good for you. And I'll prove it to you if you wait in a year or two. And at the same time, he reminds people that at the end of the day, even in Britain, the parliament gradually gained so much power to make the monarch tremble. So here in the United States, what can a term of 4-year presidency do? At the end of the day, you through the House of Representatives and Senate, through the legislature and through the judicial branch, can stop the president from doing anything crazy or something that would be too authoritarian.